talk about design. Okay, so human-computer interaction, or for example, what I do during the day, I do user experience for CIBC. That job didn't really exist 10 years ago, right? Why? Well, I mean, there's so many interfaces now, right? There are so many electronic devices that it's just becoming a big part of life. So 30 years ago, what interface did you use? The phone? That was the most complex thing. A number pad with an audio display, right? Maybe your car, that's an interface. Again, terribly simple, right? You have 2 pedals and a steering wheel. But now, I mean, just think what you can do with your computer. Everything. You can do everything, right? Write a document, pay your bills, the list is endless. So there's this practice that has sort of sprung up around the development of computing technology. Okay, so there are a lot of people just working on the hardware, the nuts and bolts, the stuff that we've been working on, and then there are other people that are working at it from a higher level, looking at, okay, so we have these amazing machines that can do amazing things. What's the best way to interact, to interface between the human and the computer? Okay, so this sort of practice really got a serious start even before computers. Basically, in World War II, they started looking at the cockpits, the layout of the cockpits inside bomber jets, for example. That's where it really took hold. This whole notion of we can scientifically, make the best quote-unquote interface. We can do that by using scientific methods. Okay. So fast forward to, let's say, the 90s, when the web was really still just, in 94, I guess you could say we had the web. But it was just starting out. So guys like this is Jacob Nielsen. This is a heavy hitter. Okay, this is, what Albert Einstein is to physics, this guy is to human-computer interaction. Okay, so he's an academic, and he's developed all sorts of methods and concepts around, what it means for a computer interface to be usable, quote unquote. Okay. So a lot of let's say if I write a paper about human-computer interaction, almost guaranteed I'll cite some of Nielsen's work. Okay. So whenever we're doing something, we can look at it from a couple of perspectives. And so what I've done here is I've juxtaposed 2 different people's perspective on what it means to have good design. Okay? So let's think about that for example. What does design even mean? What is design? Someone tell me what design is. What's design? Have something function? More in the verb, like to design. What are you doing exactly? Yeah, creative building. Okay, yeah. So creating. Design is very much half art and half science, right? Because there are, let's say if you're designing a building. There are certain rules that you can't get around. You have to do it this way. There are boundary conditions. You cannot break the laws of physics. But, so that provides you a canvas almost. And that's when the artist comes in, right? And you use your creativity to apply principles, essentially. That's what design is all about, okay? I can't tell you the best one way to make a website, right? This is how you do it. You put your navigation bar at the top, and you have 5 links, and you have your content area in the middle, and you have your footer at the bottom. That might work for one thing, but maybe not for countless other things, right? So as a designer, you have to be able to be creative, right? You have to know the rules and the principles, right? But then you have to use your creative flair to sort of take it to that next level, okay? So, how can we, so that being said, it's an art, right? So how do we, even art has a framework around it, right? People just don't go out and start creating art willy-nilly, at least I don't think so, right? So how do we, something that is seemingly, the possibilities are endless, right? If you're going to create a piece of art, it's anything. You could do anything and call it art. Same with design. You can do anything and, oh, I designed this. So so we still need to put some framework around this practice to make it somewhat cohesive, right? So that it makes sense, right? Internally and externally, right? How do we give this some, if you're not a designer, how do I make you a designer, essentially? How do I do that? So I think probably one of the only ways is through principles, looking at principles, okay? So you can, part of the task is just recognizing them, saying, oh, these are some principles that we could adhere to, right? Then the other part is that sometimes they conflict with one another. So part of what you have to do as a designer is prioritize, because you can't be everything to everyone, okay? And that's where the creativity comes in, the judgment, because there isn't a best design. There's probably 10 that'll do the job, right? And so a lot of it depends on your intuition, okay, as a designer. So what I've done here is, so on this side we have, these are design principles as laid out by Nielsen. So he's an academic, right? He doesn't really design anything. He doesn't make interfaces. He's a poor interface designer, okay? What he does is he researches interfaces. That's different, okay? That's a different approach. So he's come up with this list. So basically what he does is he looks at interfaces and he brings them to users and he tests them and says, do you think this is a good interface? And they say, yes, this was easy to use. Okay? That's basically what he does. So doing that thousands and thousands of times, he's come up with this list of principles that you should try and adhere to. Okay? Now on the other side, on this side, this was from a book written by practitioners. So these are people that actually, they design, they do this, they do design in the real world. Okay? And I wanted to show them together just to sort of illustrate, I think they're basically getting at the same thing, with maybe a little bit of differences. Like, let me see, I have, I don't have it. I had one version of these slides, I had it nicely highlighted where they overlap. But let's just go through Nielsen's. So, first of all, simple and natural dialogue, right? Like, remember when I was creating my messages, I was typing something really long, and I said, let me just make it simple, right? Or the flow of how your program works. You want to keep it as simple and natural as possible. Okay. Now that being said, you can't squeeze blood out of a stone. If your system is complex, you can't make a simple interface for a complex system, right? Maybe you can, but you won't be able to control it maybe at the level that you need to. Okay. So sometimes you have to gauge your situation. Where are you? What are you designing for? Okay, speak the user's language. So that's about knowing your user. So a big concept that came out of Nielsen's work and other people's work is something called user-centered design. Okay, so engineers, people who, let's say, study how to build buildings or build planes, they get stuck in a mechanistic view of the world. And what happens is, let's say you're building a plane, they often build the plane from the outside in. And then only do they get in, they say, oh shoot, that human being needs to go in here. Okay? If you do it that way, you're going to have problems. So what people have suggested is that you build a plane starting at the pilot and work your way out. Okay, especially you should absolutely do that for computer systems, right? Who is your user? Who are you designing for? Are you designing for senior citizens? Are you designing for 6-year-olds? Are you designing for IT experts? Who are you designing for? Okay, makes a big difference. Minimize. Question. What's that?
Can you know that before it's up?
Who your users are? Sure, you should know. That because how otherwise do you really know what kind of system you're creating? Like, I mean, I'm sure there's instances where you might throw something up and say, oh, I have no idea who. But in that case, then your user is more like a generic user, so you kind of have to build for everyone. Or in another major tenet is called universal design. And in that case, so if you have a big group, what you do is you design for the end cases, right? And then the average person just gets taken care of because you've. So let's say if you're building a water fountain, you build for the shortest person and the tallest person, and then the average person so maybe it's a fountain that kind of goes up and down, or maybe you have 3 levels or something, right? So, but you have to know your user. If you don't know your user, what are you building? Someone's going to be using it. You should do some research, figure it out who it's going to be, because it'll change how your system works, how it should work. Minimize users' memory load. So again, focusing on the user. So does anyone know what the average number of objects is you can store in your working memory? What the average number of things are? In your mind? 6? And that's a good guess. It's right. Any other guesses? 7 plus or minus 2. That is, so if I told you 11 things and then asked you a minute later, you'd probably remember 7 plus or minus 2. And I sometimes I do this experiment in my class, and it works out perfectly. Some people remember 9, some 5, some 7. It's great. So you don't want people to have to remember things. Like one thing at Centennial, in order to log into their Blackboard, you had to type in your user ID, your number, your student number. But my student number is like 11 characters long, right? And it's numbers, and I don't remember 11 numbers very well. As I remember to log in to Ryerson, I type C Branjay. I can remember my name, right? You don't make your users have to memorize stuff. Consistency. So you want internal consistency and external consistency as much as you can. So there are standards across websites. Filling out a form, it's pretty much the same, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel for stuff like that. And then internal consistency. You want all your pages to basically look the same. The different parts of your web page should work the same. It should be consistent. Okay. Feedback. So your system needs to constantly inform the user what is going on. Okay? There's nothing more frustrating than a program that's unresponsive, that's not giving you a message as to what's happening. And often it's not that it's frozen, it's that it's working. But you have to tell me that as a user, because otherwise I'm going to think you're broken. I'm going to think the system is broken, and I'm going to Control-Alt-Delete and close the program. Where really you needed to produce a message or a spinner or something indicating the system state. You need to constantly be telling the user what's going on with the system, okay? Because you can't assume that they know, okay? Clearly marked exits and shortcuts. So we're talking about navigation. Okay, so you want to make sure that people know what to do next. When you're finishing a form, what do? I click here, or I go to a web page. Okay, now what? Usually you have a call to action or something like that, right? Do this next. Shortcuts, that's actually related to user-centered design again, because remember, beginners do not stay beginners. They become experts. So you need to account for beginners. You need to get some scaffolding for them so they can learn the system. But once they learn the system, you want that scaffolding to be able to be removed. right? So Windows is a pretty good example of doing that. So it's pretty intuitive to use the point and click, but Windows has many, many keyboard shortcut keys that make everything much, much faster. Okay? Good error messages, that's related to feedback. Preventing errors, that's a big one. You don't want any error messages, ideally. You want the system to prevent errors from happening. So let's say, what are some ways, let's say we're collecting postal codes. How can we design our interface to reduce the number of errors that happen with collecting postal codes? How could we do that? Without using any JavaScript, without doing ifs or anything, I'm just talking about the actual layout of the interface. Yes, or two threes, might even better, right? So in that way, you're preventing the errors of 7 and more, right? They physically can't do it, so you're preventing the error in that way, okay? And then help and documentation, which is, if your interface is good enough, you shouldn't really need it, although you probably should provide it. But honestly, I hardly ever use documentation for software. If it's well designed, I should be able to figure it out. And just looking at the interface, I should be able to work with it. If you need to use documentation for your interface, especially for expert users, then you need to reevaluate your design because something is off. Okay? So if we look at the other side, you can see it's pretty similar. Right? So we have people with varying skill level. I think these are related. Design for wayfinding, right? Navigation. Be consistent. Consider standards, right? Consistency. Rely on recognition rather than recall. That has to do with memory. Google is great about that, right? I am a terrible speller. I cannot spell. Maybe spell check has destroyed that. Honestly though, it's not a skill that's important anymore because the computer can do it. So why would I waste time remembering how to spell things when I can go to Google, type in the first 3 letters, and boom, it knows, and it's correct. So why would I? It's like, how many of you know how to use a slide rule? You guys know what a slide rule is? So if you wanted to do really complex math before computers, it was this ruler that you had to go and slide, and I don't know how to use it, but before computers, physicists, that's what they used. Nowadays, that skill is no longer needed because we have these beauties right here, right? Same thing with spelling and memorizing. We shouldn't waste cognition on things that we don't need to use it on, right? We should be focusing on the things that humans are good at, right? High-level design, not remembering series of numbers and things like that. We're bad at that. Okay, remembering things. We're not good. So you can see that even though these two people are coming from different perspectives, they're basically talking about the same thing. Okay, so that being said, there is. Now, really, we could spend an entire course on this. As you can see, I've taught an entire course on this, so we could spend all day here. But what? Okay, so let's do a little activity here. You guys are user experience designers now. I've trained you. You guys know the principles, right? We went over the principles. So now we're going to apply these principles to a couple of interfaces here. Okay? So you recognize these, right? What are we looking at here? What remotes? TV remotes, right? Okay. Which one is better? This one? Why? Okay, let's take a vote. Well, first of all, let's give 2 seconds. That was really quick. Oh, you have it. Okay. Okay. What about, but you didn't even look at this one. How do you know? Okay, let's take a vote. Who votes that this remote you think is the best remote? The best designed remote. Nobody? Come on. Yes? Okay, one vote. Okay, you have to back it up in a second though. Okay, what about this one? Who votes for this one? Just why? Just because it's colorful or? Okay, so those who voted for this one, you have to, so explain to me, using those principles that we just looked at, why is that one A? Why is that better?
It's designed for a hand. The shape is for a hand.
Okay, good. So maybe they understand their user a little bit more? Maybe? Right? Yeah?
The buttons are standing up to the background glass. This side is the buttons, while the other one is just
Okay, okay. So can we associate that back to a to one of these? Let's see. We might not be able. Even though these are just principles, it doesn't fit everything in there. So what did you say? So you said about the what about the buttons? Clear. Okay, so maybe that could be maybe feedback, or might be hard to fit. Maybe ergonomically, definitely with the hand thing, right? So maybe Nielsen sort of missed out on that.
You could classify it as minimizing user memory because
Okay.
you have that sense of contrast where things are clearly identified
Right.
for you. So you don't have to remember which button is which.
Right, because look at down here, they're just uniform. Uniform shape, probably a tiny little label you can't read, and then you have to remember, right? So that, but this one here, they're just you know the color differences make it just obvious, right? Okay, what else?
There's also a sense of hierarchy with the buttons too. Like you
Okay.
have a little bit of that on the other remote with the
A little bit.
size of the buttons, but there's more of that.
Right. But see, the thing is, and I think this one would relate to natural dialogue, which I think is referring to our intuition, our intuitive sense of the world. So if you look back here, notice how if you want to go up in channels, you press up. If you want to go up in volume, you also press up. Oh, it's the wrong slide deck.
The other one would have that.
Which one was it? This one.
It's like those doors that always have like the pull handles.
Yes, exactly. It has a pull handle, and they put a label, push. Well, why don't you just put a flat thing, and then you don't need the label anymore? Because it's intuitive. How do I... Right. So here, you know, up, down. This one, if you want to go up in volume, you press right. I mean, that doesn't make sense. What else? Why else is this monitor, this remote better? Yep.
The space between the buttons gives you kind of control over where your fingers are pushed.
Yep. So part of that, I think, maybe is let's look back to these. So I think a lot of that has to do with feedback. And okay, so how are we able to receive feedback? What are the 5 modes that we can get feedback in?
5 senses.
Exactly. So we have taste, touch, smell, hearing, and sight. So primarily, what types of feedback are they utilizing here that maybe they're not utilizing here as much? Actually 2 modes, I would say at least.
Sight and touch.
Yeah, exactly. Because they've colored the buttons better. So there's some, when you look at it, there's some feedback, and there's also tactile feedback, and that's important because usually, what's the lighting conditions when you're using a television remote? Usually dark, right? It's at night, and I can remember back when I used to watch TV real late in my parents' place, and they had a remote, and the buttons weren't very good, and it was always dark, and I kind of had to feel around and press a couple times. But here you have tactile feedback, good feedback that lets you know exactly what you're touching or not. Whereas this one, I mean, who knows what that is?
There's saying
Right?
computer.
Even when you can see it, it's not even clear what it does. But this one, like this, you would need a manual for. This one, you would not. Okay. So see how it's clear. Now, is this the only way to design a remote? No. Is this a good design? Yes. Is this a bad design? Yes.
I was also going to say the icons on the buttons.
Yeah.
Okay, rather than just like text.
Rather than impossibly small text.
Identifiable icons.
Exactly. Or, for the most part, you shouldn't even, by even the shape of the button, you could probably, a lot of this is redundant, which is good. You want redundant coding. But, yeah. Okay, so what I want to do now is I'm going to show you Ajax, the tool Ajax. And I'm just going to run you through it very, very quickly. And then what we're going to do after that, so I'll spend maybe 10, 15 minutes going through Ajax. And then we'll get into our groups and we're going to spend the rest of the class. And then I'll have you submit your wireframes not next week, but the week after. So what we're doing, primarily, yes?
Sorry, this is for the group assignment.
This is for the group assignment, yeah. Okay, so, so how do we convey our designs? As user experience designers, how do we convey, so let's say we have an idea for a screen in mind, some sort of interface elements. So how do we convey that design, right? So a building architect, they would put together, let's say, blueprints. What's that noise? No? Oh well. So what we do as designers is we do what are called wireframes. Okay? So wireframes are low fidelity prototypes of your interface. Okay? And wireframes can run the full gamut from a drawing on the back of a napkin to interactive prototypes. So for example, today I was in London doing user testing with CIBC, and so we use Ajax. We build a fake version of the software that we're testing. We build it in Ajax, and then the users can basically pretend to use the system, and we can get a sense of how usable it is, right? So then, but other stakeholders, they just might want to see a picture. They don't need to see necessarily the whole interactive thing, so they might just see a picture. And then, maybe if I'm discussing with my boss and I have some ideas, I'll just, I'll sketch it out on a piece of paper, and this is what it looks like. So it's all, wireframes are about conveying your design idea. So I think generally you should probably use the lowest fidelity possible. If you can just do it on a napkin, that's fine. If your project is informal, that's okay. If you need, maybe your interface is really specific or customized, so you need something, then you may need to do something a little with more higher fidelity. Okay? Okay, so Ajax Pro, it's actually quite expensive. It's about $500 for a license, but there's a 30-day trial that we shall use. And like I said, this is what I use a lot for my day job. So what it is it's a web-based tool. You can build basically web pages using drag and drop functionality. Okay, so should you use this to create a web page? No, because what happens is the code that it produces. So you can create interactivity and links and all that stuff, but the JavaScript code it generates is very inefficient and slow. So it's definitely, you would not use this for production. You use this to create wireframes, to convey your ideas to project stakeholders, right? Okay, so what we have here is, so it works a lot like, this is basically a very dumbed down version of Illustrator that allows us to export what we've done to a web page that then we can run in a browser. Okay? So on the side here, so in the main area, this is our sort of our content area where we drag everything in. That's where our web page is going to come alive. Here we have our library of widgets. And so some of the things should be familiar to you. That's why I wanted to start you off at the low level, because now you'll recognize, oh, H1, that's a heading, right? Label, paragraph, right? These are all things that you've learned about. And this is a web-based tool, so it's going to be using web-based technology. Okay, so we have images, headings, rectangles, placeholders, buttons, horizontal lines, hotspots. Those are really handy. Dynamic panels, I think maybe we'll have time to get into that. Repeaters, we won't have time to look into repeaters. You can create tables and things that are dynamic. And then we have form elements, so text fields, text areas, drop-down lists. This should all be very familiar, right? Checkboxes, radio, HTML buttons, tables, and menus and whatnot. Okay. Then here, this is your sort of project navigation. So this is your main page, then your sort of child pages. Okay. On the side here, we have widget interaction. So you'll see when we select a widget, we can assign different things. Like, okay, when you click this widget, open up another link, or change the label of this thing, or we can assign interactivity like we've been starting to do with JavaScript, but we don't have to know any JavaScript. Okay, and then here's where we set widget properties and style. Okay, things like size and font color and all that stuff. Okay, okay, so let's just throw together a quick, let's say a quick website, right? So what we can do is, what's a website? Somebody give me an idea of something to build for. Something quick and easy. Small little website. Any ideas? No? Come on. Nothing? Okay, how about a veterinarian clinic?
Is that easy?
Yes, pretty easy. Okay, so let's say let's work out. So what are before we even do that, let's think veterinarian clinic. So what are the sections that we're going to have? Let's work out our pages that we're going to have.
Fees and services.
Sure. So fees, services. Let's have like a landing page or a home page. Okay. What else? Contact us. Okay. What else? About us. Okay. Anything else?
Tips.
Yeah, maybe like info, like a blog tips kind of, articles, how to get rid of fleas, stuff like that. Okay, good. That's a good start. Okay, so let's go back here. And so what we could do is we could lay out our pages how we define them here. So let's start with home. We have home. Then the next one was fees. Right, fees, and then the next one was services. So I'm just clicking and changing it. Services, contact us. So that's good for now. We'll come back and maybe fill this out later. So let's design our home page. So the first thing is we need some sort of navigation bar. So what we could do is let's just create the labels. We're just roughing it out. Usually I like to get what we need, and then once it's on there, then maybe we'll start redesigning stuff. So maybe, so what was it? Fees, fees, services. So I'm just copying and pasting. Services, contact us, and what was the other one? About us. Yeah. Okay, so now, blog tips. Okay, so now we can use typical like vector graphics stuff. So we could highlight them all. We can do things like align the top. So there's all these tools here. We can distribute horizontally so it makes it even. Just quick little handy visual tools. Okay. So now let's go to fees and let's just create a heading, just so that we know our page, and let's put fees there. Okay. And so let's go back to our home, and what we can do is we'll click on fees, And see now in our widget interaction and notes, see here we have a couple of options here. So these are events. Okay, so there are many more events. These are all the events that this label can register. But the one we want is on click. Right? When we click it, we want it to do something. So we'll double click on click, and then we get this little menu. Okay? So now these are all the things we can do when we click that label. So we can open a link, close a window, we could show or hide other widgets, we can set what a widget says, we can enable or disable widgets, we can even set values of variables. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to open a link. And so it says open in current window. We can open up in a pop-up window or a new tab. And we'll select fees. Okay? So now, yep. Oh, so I clicked here. Then I went over to Widget Interactions and Notes. And I clicked here. And then I went to Open Link, which put here, and then, so it was like this. It looked like, so I clicked on Open Link, and then I got 2 links, and then I said Open Fees in the current window. Okay. Okay. So now let's run our web page. We can actually run it. So see the play button up here? That's our preview. So we click here, and now we can preview what we've done. And it's going to open up our browser automatically for us. So here we go. Here's our web page. So if we click on fees, there we go. We have a little link. Okay. So one thing, what we'll do is in Azure we have things called masters. So those are things that will be common across multiple pages. And a navigation bar is something that is common, right? So what we would do, let's create a new master called navbar. And I'm going to click here, and I'm going to cut, and I'm going to go back to double click on my navbar, which I've now opened, and I'm going to paste it in here. Okay, I'm going to put it up here like this. And now I can close my navbar and go back to my home page and drag in my navbar from my master. Okay. Now if I want to go to fees, I can do the same thing. Okay, so now if I go, let's say I'm like, oh, I don't like blog or tips. I just want to make it blog. So I go back here, change only the master, and now it's changed across all pages. Okay? So let's just do a couple more. So that's probably as functional as you'll need things to be for the assignment. Right? I don't expect you guys to do a lot of interactivity. Yep?
How would you put the navigation bar of the exact same spot?
You don't. You have to just position it for each page.
So you can't copy it to the exact same location?
Well, what you could do is, so if you click here, then where's my... Oh, there's some things missing because my screen is so small. Toolbars, panes. Because normally, where's... Oh, it's hidden somewhere here. Here we go. Okay, see it's hidden here? So what you could do is click on your element, click here, and then it tells you the XY position. So you could just make a note of it, and then put the other one in the exact position. And same with width. Like let's say you want to make all your text boxes a certain height, rather than trying to squeeze them all with the mouse, you just pick them and then select and then set the value, right? So let's say home. We might have a rectangle, so we could throw in a rectangle there, okay? And then we can drag it to make it big. Or actually, let's do that in the master. So we'll double click in the navbar, and we'll move all these down, and I'll create a little rectangle here. And so notice that it went in front. Okay, so what I would do is then right click, pick order. So order determines the Z axis, so which is something in front or behind. So I'll send it to the back, and then my other elements will be up front. Okay, so now now what we can do is, we can change the border. Let's make it red. Okay, and maybe let's change the fill. So, just have a look at these icons up here. They're pretty self-explanatory. We could change the fill color. Let's make it gray. And then we'll select all of these. Let's change the font size. Let's make it 28. Whoops, that's too big. Let's make it 18. Okay, that's reasonable. We might have to spread these out a little bit more. Okay. And let's go back to our fees now. So now we have a nice little... So let's say... okay, let's do our Contact Us page. So we'll put in a heading. Just drag it in. We'll do Contact Us. Okay. And now, so what sorts of things do we need? So we're going to need to build a form. So what do we need for Contact Us? Like let's say, well, let's make an email form so they can fill out a form and send an email. So what would we need? Sorry? Name? Okay, sure. So we drag in a form field here, and then we drag in a label. Call this name. What else do we want? Maybe a drop down, because we want to know the reason that people are talking or mailing us. So we'll drag in a drop down menu here. So see, we have that. Now, if we want to put the items in, we just double click. And then we just add them in. So I'll click Add. Or actually, let's go to Add Many. And then so I could say, my dog is sick. What do I do about fleas? My cat pukes up weird things. My cat is the worst. I hate my cat. Oh, like walking around at night and you step on something wet. It's never, ever good. Never good. Yeah, lizards are cool. Okay, so now we just type them in, and they're all there. And let's get rid of that one. So we click OK. So now if I preview my page, now it's going to come up with my stuff here. Okay. Okay. So let's go back. So let's finish that off. So then maybe we'll put another. We'll just copy this. I like to copy and paste rather than dragging too much. Maybe we'll call this reason, and then let's do a checkbox. So we'll say, or no, let's do a radio button. So we'll say, let's make the label current. What are they called? Clients? Yeah, current client.
The animal is a patient. Person.
Is the client? Okay. So we'll say, yes, and we'll copy it again. Yes, no. And then what we want to do, so remember we have to make radio buttons a part of the same group. So we would click here, go over to our Properties and Style pane, and see it says Assign Radio Group. So can we just type it in? No. Yeah, I think so. So we'll say Current. And then I'll click on the other one, and then current should be there. No? Oh, I guess not. Okay. Current. We'll type that in as well. So now when I press F5 to run my preview, right, now I have a nice little radio button. Okay? And then let's say we have one more thing. A text area. Okay? And one more is our... So there are a couple of types. We'll stick with the HTML button for now. Okay? So then maybe we'll have one more page. So we'll make it a child of the Contact Us page. So I'll right-click on Contact Us, and I'll click Add, Child Page, and I'll say Thank You Message. Okay? And I'll double-click here, and I'll just say something like, thank you for contacting us. Okay? And I'll go back to contact us. Double click. And I'll click on my submit button. And I'm going to double click on click. And then I'm going to say open link, thank you message, good to go. Play. So now we have our form. Blah, blah, blah. Pick this, put that in. There we go. Okay? So the idea is that you're not going to create the website, a fully robust website. You're going to create an example of, a typical use case, right? Because you want to be able to show your stakeholders. Okay? Okay. So, here's your assignment. So, what I recommend is, over the next, I'll be here till 9:20. So for the next 40 minutes, get together with your group, and either, if you want to start in Azure, if you think you're comfortable enough just from the quick demo you saw, or if you want to maybe just sketch some ideas on paper to get started, you might want to start there. Okay, here's what you're designing for. You can choose one of two things. Either a mobile app, okay, so this is something that'll work on screens this size, okay, around this size, or a desktop app. So it's a either a web page or a mobile, or a web page for mobile, and it's a ordering system for McDonald's. Okay, so if it's the desktop, let's say if it's the desktop, assume that the desktop is located at the restaurant, at McDonald's, and that the customer would walk up and enter in their order and submit it, and then the order would be made. Don't worry about, worry about payment. So assume, I'll write this down, and I'll post it up so you know exactly. So assume that you have to process payment. So it's like, like you would do at self-checkout, right? So they have a swipe, no cash. It's only, so no cash, plastic only, and it's in store. So this isn't like, it's not like you order from Pizza at home. It exists at McDonald's only, okay? Or the app, which would be the same thing. You would be in the store, you would have the app, and you couldn't pay. Let's say, assume you could pay from a McDonald's account, right? So if you signed up for an account and you loaded money on it, assume that you could pay from that if you have the phone. Otherwise, they have to pay when they pick up their food with cash or credit or something. Okay? So as a group, decide whether you want to do the mobile app or the desktop app. So it's going to be a lot different, right? What you can present here is much, much different than what you can present on a big screen, right? And then on this, you have a big fat finger that's probably 20 pixels big, where the mouse is only 1 pixel, right? You can really pick out the fine detail. Okay, so McDonald's ordering system, so either desktop or mobile. For the desktop, you can process plastic. For the app, you can pay from your account. Okay, so how many of you are regular McDonald's eaters? No one? Come on, once a week, that's okay. Big Mac? No? Okay, so you can look up their menu. Okay, and so remember, you have to consider everything, right? So let's say if I order a Big Mac, is that it? What else? I can get no pickles. I can get, or I can get, so if I get let's say if I order a drink, they come in 4 or 5 sizes. So it's a big menu. Not a big menu. No, it's a medium-sized menu. So, again, these are wireframes. Okay. What I want to see from you is, so I don't want to see the entire design. Like, let's say if there was 50 toppings, for example. Okay. you don't, in your prototype, you don't have to like look it up and put all the topping. Just put like 2 or 3 ... and then, you know, I'll know this is where all the toppings go. And at least, you know, maybe create a box where it would fit, but don't spend hours, you know, working out the finer details. I want to see the major mechanics, right? Like your navigation. How are you organizing your pages? Like, do you just list all your food, or are you gonna sort it into like apps or desserts or, you know, meals or combos, or, you know, that's where the design is laying out the major parts, right? Not the, you know, not the making sure all the details are in there. That's not what a wireframe is, right? That's for the developers later. We're designers. We get to do just the high-level fun stuff, and we pass that along to some other poor sap who has to do the real hard work of implementing it for real, right? We get the easy job. So don't, you know, if you find yourself spending hours, this assignment is not meant to be tedious, right? It's to work out design ideas, okay? So maybe work a little bit on paper, and then, you know, transfer your ideas into a Azure. Okay? Okay, so any questions? I will type up what I just said, and I'll post it on Blackboard. Question? As soon as you pick it? You could. With Azure, you can do anything. So, right, we'll click here, and see here it says on selection change. You could do that, but I don't think it makes sense to go to a new page right from there. Because, I mean, you're setting part of the form, and we're already at the form. So remember, with Azure and with just like the web, you can make it do anything. You could, on text change, so I could make it go to a new page when I type in a letter, right? You could make it do anything, you know. But is it good, right? Is it good design? That's the question. Right? Yeah, I mean that's up to you as a designer, right? Usually, for the most part, you don't want to be switching to refreshing pages much. So we probably won't get into too much, but there's a technology called Ajax, which you've definitely used. But whenever you notice aspects of a web page refreshing without the entire page refreshing, that's Ajax. And for the most part, you should always be doing that. Ideally, you should have one page that never refreshes.
So it's like, I use VNet Converter on Google. So it'd be like that, right? That would be Ajax, for example.
Yeah, so, you know, or at Google, yeah, that's a perfect example. So, so let's see. So when I start, well, it refreshed, but so now let's say I type Ryerson, it'll start searching, isn't it? See, already before I even type, and the stuff came up without reloading. See how the page changed, but it didn't reload. That's so. You know, I'll show you. I'll probably just touch on that through the use of jQuery in a couple of lectures. But for the most part, when you refresh a whole page, it's just very jarring, and it takes people out of the flow. So as best as possible, you know, Google has pretty good forms. Like, let's say sign up, Gmail sign up.
Oh, yeah,
You know, as you type, it'll tell you. I'll show you here. Yeah, I got to sign out of my account. How do I sign out of this? Sign out. Okay. So for example, sign in. No, I want to create a new account. Okay. So I create an account. Here we go. Beautiful. So likely what will happen, see that? That's Ajax. Now see, if I type in cbranje, it should tell me, aha, see it? It told me without refreshing the page and without using an alert box. It told me something is wrong. It's already in use, right? And so I'll show you how to do this with jQuery, probably in a week or two. I'll show you how to change parts of the page once it's already been loaded. Okay? Okay. So any other questions? Nope. Okay. Everybody has their groups? Yes? And you have a copy of Azure? Yeah. Okay, so what I recommend is working probably just with some paper prototypes for now, just sketching out some ideas, maybe the next 20 minutes or so, half hour, just throw some ideas back and forth about how maybe some high level, how you're going to lay out the page, how you're going to lay out the site, and then, because you won't have much time to get started. Then maybe next week we'll have some time. Oh, we won't be together next week. Yeah, we'll have to. I guess you'll have to split it up. Well, no, I'll give you some more time. It won't be due in 2 weeks. I'll give you some more time to work on it in class, because I think you need to be together in the same room. You can't do this kind of stuff over email. It just doesn't work.
Thank you for understanding that.
Yeah. Some things you can do over email. Some things you can't.
Teacher doesn't understand that.
No, it's not working. Yeah. It's especially when you don't know people. Like once you've established a rapport, then you can start to kind of go remote. But initializing there's a challenge. Okay. Any questions? Cool. So get to it. I'm hungry. I'm looking forward to using your ordering system to get some food quickly. Right? It has to be fast. I don't want to have to press 20 clicks to get a Big Mac. Right? 3 clicks, I should have a Big Mac. Okay, stop.